Welcome to the Trans Day of Remembrance and Resilience special episode of Rainbow Devilcast. I'm your host, Savannah Grace. Trans Day of Remembrance began as a project in 1999 after Rita Hester was murdered on November 28, 1998. It is a yearly day dedicated to memorializing those who were killed as a result of transphobic violence all around our world. More recently, folks have begun adding on "and resilience" to the title of the day, or celebrating the 2 days simultaneously, as a way of reminding us of the incredible fortitude of trans and gender nonconforming folks, even in the face of oppression. This episode, you'll hear words from a few trans folks on campus reflecting on the day. Some students, some faculty, some older, some younger.
My name is Quinn.
Cole Rizki.
Angel Collie.
Hi, I'm Liz.
Content warnings apply for mentions of murder, assault, sexual violence, and self-harm. What does Trans Day of Remembrance and Resilience mean for you?
I think that it's an important day to memorialize the gender-based violence that so many people experience. And I think we're really remembering it started in 1999 after Rita Hester was murdered, and I think that we have to memorialize those lives. I think so often we have so many people that are unreported in so many places. We don't have hate crimes legislation, and so many go unrecognized. And I think often what happens is violence is often done again in the way that in which folks are remembered. What I mean by that is what often happens is people's families will not use the name they may have used, may not use the pronouns that the person used, and in death and burial, not honor the identities that folks have, and so I think remembering rightly is really important, and for me that's part of what the day represents.
So for me, Trans Day of Remembrance is about not necessarily remembering the dead, though in part, yes, but I think for me it's more about examining my own privilege and that I am alive, and thinking about the ways in which I am complicit in the systems of violence that are operating to erase trans people.
Trans Day of Remembrance is a time for people to sit and think about not necessarily how far we've come, but how much farther we have to go. A lot of other marginalized identities have awareness weeks, or have pride, or have celebration. And trans folks do have that too. We have Trans Day of Resilience, which is the same day as Trans Day of Remembrance, actually, and other similar things, but not many other marginalized sexual orientations and gender identities have remembrance days. And it's really unique to the trans experience because trans folks face so much higher rates of assault and murder, and even within that there's so much internal privilege. The statistic goes around that 1 in 12 trans people is murdered, but that doesn't take into account race, and that doesn't take into account sex assigned at birth. So as a white assigned female at birth person, I don't face that significantly higher level of stigma to a point. I have microaggressions, of course. There's misgendering and people assuming that you're a boy or a girl and things like that, but I usually don't have to fear for my life in scenarios, and I know that there are other people who do. So for me, Trans Day of Remembrance is thinking back on how far we've come and how far we still have to go, because we are not done with this fight, but also understanding my relative privilege and understanding that a lot of the things we're remembering are things that I'm never going to have to face.
I also know that it's important to be aware that we are majority, at least in the U.S., majority white folks who are memorializing a day that where the names that populate the list and the people that are most impacted are those with multiple marginalized identities. So majority see transgender women who are people of color, and I think the numbers that are usually we see the most staggering numbers are coming out of Brazil and Central and South America. I think it's important to keep that in mind, and how we do that. I also know that I think I generally struggle with what does it mean to, how do we memorialize and honor this day in ways that are mindful and intentional? And because on the one hand, like, to not do anything would to me be problematic, and then how we do things I think is crucial.
To me, Trans Day of Remembrance and Resilience means a time to, of course, clichely remember all our trans people that have been murdered and hurt and killed, always unjustly. And I think that every day should be a day that we remember that, of course, especially as a trans person. I'm always cognizant of how people like me are dying all the time, and it's terrifying. But I think that Trans Day of Remembrance and Resilience is really important because it is a day specifically to commemorate that and get that message out to others. And as the name implies, Trans Day of Remembrance and Resilience also means to me remembering that although all these negative things may be happening, that all these negative things are happening, I, as a trans person, have gone through so much and am still resilient and have gotten through it. And so many other trans people, too, have been able to get through this, and we are resilient in spite of this negativity and badness out there.
What's something you would want trans folks to hear on this day? And what's something you would want cisgender folks to know on this day?
On Trans Day of Remembrance, I'd like for trans and cis folks alike to think more about how, when we remember the deaths of people as acts of transphobia, this structures the ways that we can understand deaths and people's lives. So I'm thinking with a number of trans studies scholars who are invested in critical race theory, like C. Riley Snorton or Jen Harita Warren or Sarah Lamble, who propose that when white trans people come together collectively to mourn deaths of people who are largely trans people of color, if we're not unpacking the ways in which multiple systems of oppression are operating, then we're actually running the risk of becoming complicit with those very systems. So some of what I think about is if we're going to talk about resilience, and if Trans Day of Remembrance is to become Trans Day of Resilience, then I think we need to think about how we might transform our present by examining our privilege. So the kind of resilience that I'm talking about isn't about passing hate crime legislation or reforming the law. Resilience for me is about fighting in the present for a more just world. And that involves dismantling systems of oppression both in our everyday lives and also in our society at large. As a trans studies scholar who's invested in intersectional analysis, I'd like to remind us all that a disproportionate people of trans people who are remembered as having been murdered because they were trans are in fact trans women of color, and black trans women more specifically. So when we frame death as the result of transphobia, we run the risk of erasing the ways in which violence is structured by questions that concern race, whether a person is documented, undocumented, living in poverty, homeless, participating in street economies or sex work out of necessity, and also incarceration status. So we're running the risk of remembering people as trans, of erasing the numerous ways in which violence operates. So on Trans Day of Remembrance, as a critique, I'd ask us to ask questions about not just who people are and who people were, but also how we remember, and how this remembering structures particular narratives around violence that may not be doing justice to both those who are gone and also the type of world we would want to live in.
I think I would want trans folks to hear that you are loved, you are beautiful, who you are is whole and authentic and wonderful. And I think living in a world that can't honor and see the many gifts that trans and gender non-conforming people bring is really a shame in so many ways. So I think just to stand confident in your truth.
Understand that you may not understand what's going on. You might not understand why people are upset or why people are in mourning or why trans people can't be mourned on any other day. You might not get it, And you need to be okay with that. You need to be okay with not understanding the pain and not understanding the hurt that we feel, because it's not a good thing to feel. I don't want cis people to think, I can't be upset like you are. I want to be a trans person. Like, please understand that we're not trying to purposefully exclude you to be mean. It's that you can't understand what it's like to constantly be misgendered. You can't understand what it's like to consistently be told that you can't be what you are. You don't understand what it's like to fear sexual assault and rape to the degree that trans people fear it. That's not to say that cis people can't have sexual assault, because of course you can, but there are higher rates of sexual assault for LGBT folks, for trans people, and it's okay that you don't understand, but also get that we may not want to explain it to you right now because we are in pain.
I would like cis folks to listen to the stories of trans folks. I know it might be like weird or hard to understand, whatever. I was just making like hand gestures for those at home. But there are so many other things that are weird and hard to understand, like society and media and like the presidency. Like, things are very confusing right now. But take the time to listen to someone. I know you want to be listened to as a cis person about your problems too. Listen to a trans person and don't just otherize them and think, oh, well, they're trans, so I'm not going to worry about them. I'm going to like swipe left on Tinder, and I'm going to just ignore them when I pass by them, like at the bus stop, like things like that. No, trans people are people. We're all people, and we need to listen to each other and engage with each other and listen to each other's stories. And I know for some people, like, for some of you, it could be really hard to be able to engage in that way and mindfully listen, but I really encourage you and challenge you to do so, because it will make trans people happier, it will make you happier, and it will make everyone happier, hopefully.
You are not a statistic, and you do not have to be a statistic. There's so much information going around recently about trans suicide rates, and that 41% of trans folks attempt to kill themselves, and you are worth so much more than the statistics people throw around, and you are worth so much more than you can imagine. Your identity is valid, and your words are valid, and your life is valid, and there is so much that you have to offer this world and offer this universe, and I would miss you if you were gone. I don't care if I don't know you. If you are not here, the world has lost somebody important. And I want trans people to understand that their lives and their genders and their pronouns and everything about them is so important and special and valid, and that I don't want the world to lose an important person.
I think I want cis folks to be aware of the ways in which gender roles and expectations impact all of us, and obviously disproportionately impacts trans and gender nonconforming people, and that we need cis folks who are allies to disrupt systems of oppression and when they see them in place, and so interrupting instances of cis sexism, not replicating them in the policies and practices that they are carrying out, and speak out against the harm that is done towards trans and gender nonconforming folks.
On this day, I really want trans people to know that you are worth hearing out. Your story is worth hearing, because for a very long time I was scared to share my story, and even if I wasn't as scared at different times, it's hard because so many things in society and in media tell you that you don't matter and your story does not have a place out there, and your story has a place, and someone not only is willing to listen to you, wants to hear you, and go and share your stories, because it's stories like these that are going to be able to change what being trans means to other people. And even if you don't feel like you can or want to put yourself out there, at least go find a therapist and share your story with them, because this is how we can get frustrated and sad and confused and fall into depression, anxiety, and suicide, is by feeling like we don't matter and like our stories do not matter. And of course it's so easy to feel like that, and if you don't feel like that, I don't blame you. It's really hard, but I I really encourage you and help you know that there's someone out there that wants to hear your story. I want to hear your story. Find me on Facebook. I'll listen to your story because your story deserves to be heard.
This episode was produced and edited by Savannah Grace. Eternal gratitude for Cole, Angel, Quinn, and Liz for speaking with me for this episode. Thanks to the usual team for enabling my self-care and letting me enable yours. Music for this episode was by Kevin McLeod, Hyacinth Jaden, and Blue Dot Sessions. Stay strong, stay beautiful. Peace and love.